Have you ever felt like the ground beneath your feet was alive? Not just with insects, not with roots or water, but with something ancient. Something that watches you even as you take your next step. Massachusetts holds a secret place like that, a stretch of land locals whisper about but never linger in after dark. They call it the Bridgewater Triangle, a cursed 200 square mile zone where reality bends, where lights dance across the sky and where people vanish, leaving nothing but silence behind. Once you step inside, some say, you don't walk back out alone. It was the fall of 1998 when my cousin Mark dared me to go with him. He'd been obsessed with the triangle for months, collecting stories from dusty library archives and talking to anyone in Brockton or Abington who would share a rumor, UFOs, satanic rituals in the woods, ghostly hitchhikers on the side of Route 44. He wanted proof, and he was reckless enough to believe we could find it. I was 17 then, young enough to think I was invincible, old enough to know that some places are better left alone. We set out on a gray October afternoon, backpacks slung over our shoulders, flashlights rattling inside. The air smelled like wet leaves and stagnant water, the kind of smell that seeps into your clothes. As we crossed into the Hockomock Swamp, one of the triangle's darkest hearts, the world grew unnaturally quiet. No birds, no crickets. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate. Feels like we just walked into a coffin, Mark muttered, trying to laugh it off. We found an old hunter's trail, little more than a path swallowed by reeds and cattails. The mud clung to our boots, sucking with each step. I kept glancing back, convinced that someone or something was following. Shadows seemed to ripple in the corners of my eyes, but every time I turned, nothing was there. The deeper we went, the more wrong everything felt. Trees leaned at unnatural angles, their branches twisted like claws. The swamp water reflected the dull sky, but sometimes the reflections moved. Not like ripples, but like shapes beneath the surface, pressing upward. At one point, I swear I saw a pale hand just under the waterline, fingers splayed as if reaching for air. I blinked, and it was gone. Mark stopped abruptly, holding his hand up. Ahead, in a clearing of the swamp, stood a circle of stones. They were too large, too smooth to be natural. Moss clung to them, but their arrangement was deliberate, ritualistic. In the center, a charred black patch scarred the earth, as if something had burned there long ago. "This is it," he whispered. His eyes gleamed with excitement, not fear. "This is what they talked about, ritual sites, satanic gatherings. This is proof." But proof of what? I wanted to turn back. Every instinct screamed at me to get out. But before I could speak, the air shifted. A foul stench rolled over us, sulfur like rotting eggs. The silence deepened, pressing against our ears until I could hear nothing but the thudding of my own heartbeat. Then came the sound, low at first, like a hum under the ground. It rose slowly, almost like chanting, though no one was there. The stones seemed to vibrate. Mark raised his flashlight, and the beam flickered, struggling against the thickening darkness. "Did you hear that?" he asked, but his voice was thin, cracked. Before I could answer, the chanting stopped. The swamp went still again, and then laughter. A woman's laughter, sharp and mocking, drifting from somewhere behind us. We spun around, the beam of our flashlight cutting through the reeds, but there was nothing. "Who's there?" Mark shouted, his voice shaking. No reply, just the sound of water sloshing as if something was wading closer. My stomach turned cold. We ran. Branches clawed at our arms, mud sucked at our boots, and the swamp seemed endless, stretching farther than it should have. My lungs burned, but the sound followed us, splashing footsteps, deliberate, keeping pace. The laughter rose again, this time closer, almost in my ear. Finally, we stumbled onto a drier patch of ground, gasping for breath. I dared to glance back. The swamp was empty. No footprints, no figure, just mist curling low over the water. Mark bent over, clutching his knees, grinning like he'd just won something. "Do you get it now?" he said. "It's real. The stories, they're real." I wanted to punch him. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. But then something caught my eye. On the ground where we stood pressed deep into the mud were footprints, not ours. These were larger, bare, and clawed, like something had walked beside us the entire way. When I pointed it out, Mark's smile faltered, his bravado cracked. For the first time since we stepped into the triangle, I saw fear in his eyes. And then, just as we stood frozen, the flashlight died. The darkness swallowed us whole. I couldn't take it anymore. 3 nights of knocking, 3 nights of light circling the house, and 3 nights of that laughter slipping into my dreams. I knew what I had to do, though every instinct screamed against it. If the triangle had followed us out, maybe the only way to end it was to go back in. I packed nothing but a flashlight, a pocket knife, and a rosary my grandmother once gave me. My parents thought I was staying at a friend's, but I didn't expect to return. I biked toward the swamp at dusk, the horizon painted in blood-red light. By the time I reached the trail, the world was already sinking into shadow. The Hockomock swamp waited like an open mouth, mist rolling out of it, thick and sour. The trees creaked as if they were warning me. My flashlight beam cut through the fog, and for a moment I almost turned back. But then I saw it just ahead on the trail. Mark. He stood half hidden in the mist, his clothes torn and caked with mud. His skin looked gray, almost drained of color, and his eyes reflected the beam in an unnatural way, like an animal caught in headlights. "Mark," I called out, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just turned and began walking deeper into the swamp. I followed, calling his name again and again, my shoes sinking into the muck. Every step seemed heavier, as though the swamp wanted to drag me under. The chanting began again, faint at first, then rising all around me. Shadows flickered in the mist, figures just beyond reach, their lantern lights swaying. Finally, we reached the clearing, the stone circle, the charred earth. But now it wasn't empty. Figures stood between the stones, tall and thin, draped in shadows like tattered cloaks. Their faces were hollow, their hands long and clawed. They didn't move, didn't breathe. They just stared. Mark stepped into the circle. "You shouldn't have come," he said, but his voice wasn't his. It was layered, as if 100 voices spoke through him. "What do you want from us?" I shouted. The figures tilted their heads in unison. The chanting rose, echoing inside my skull. The ground trembled, and the charred earth in the center split open, releasing a stench so foul I gagged. From the cracks seeped a bluish light, the same lantern glow that had haunted us. Mark looked at me with those blackened eyes. "Once you cross, you belong to them," he said. His lips curled into that impossible smile. "There's no leaving." I stumbled back, clutching the rosary in my fist. The figures began to move, gliding toward me, their clawed hands stretching out. The chanting grew deafening. My flashlight flickered wildly, and in the brief flashes of light I saw faces in the mist, dozens of them. Men, women, children. Hollow-eyed, their mouths frozen in silent screams. The lost ones. I dropped to my knees, clutching the rosary so tightly it cut into my palm. "Please," I whispered, not even knowing who I was begging. The ground shook harder, the crack widening, the light flaring until it burned my eyes. The chanting stopped. And in the silence, the laughter came again, closer than ever. Something touched my shoulder, cold, wet. I screamed and swung the knife, but it passed through empty air. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying at the edge of the road. Dawn was breaking, the swamp behind me shrouded in mist. My clothes were soaked, caked with mud, my knuckles raw from gripping the rosary. There was no sign of Mark, no sign of the circle, or the figures, or the light. For a while, I tried to convince myself it had been a nightmare, a hallucination. But when I reached into my pocket, I found something that froze my blood. It was Mark's phone, cracked, caked in mud. The same one I'd seen on his bedroom floor. I never saw him again. His family never came back. And though I tried to bury it to move on, the triangle never let me go. Some nights I wake to the sound of knocking on the window. Some nights the lights float outside my house, patient, waiting. And last week, for the first time in years, I heard it again. That laughter. It's only a matter of time before it comes back for me. Because in the Bridgewater Triangle, nothing you take in stays behind, and nothing you bring out ever lets you go. I threw on my jacket and ran through the night to Mark's house, my breath clouding in the cold air. His place sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of street where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But even before I reached the porch, I knew something was wrong. His upstairs window glowed with a strange bluish light, pale and flickering like the lanterns in the swamp. I pounded on the door, calling his name, but there was no answer. The knob turned easily in my hand. Inside, the house smelled of damp earth, sharp and suffocating, as if the swamp itself had seeped through the walls. My sneakers left faint prints in a thin layer of mud across the carpet. "Mark?" I whispered, my voice trembling. No reply. I climbed the stairs, each creak of the wood sounding like a gunshot in the silence. The bluish glow leaked from under his bedroom door. I pushed it open, bracing myself. The room was empty, but the walls were covered in symbols drawn in mud, spirals and jagged shapes that seemed to writhe if I looked too long. On the floor lay Mark's phone, its screen cracked, still buzzing with missed calls. In the center of the room, the mud formed a wide circle. I felt the air shift colder, heavier. And then faintly, I heard it again, the chanting, not from outside, from the walls themselves. The mud shapes pulsed like veins, alive and beating. I backed out of the room, heart slamming against my ribs. That's when I saw him. Mark stood at the end of the hallway, but something was wrong. His posture was rigid, his head tilted too far to the side, his arms hanging unnaturally straight. His eyes caught the glow from the bedroom, and for a split second they looked black. Entirely black. "Mark," I said, my voice cracking. He smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was too wide, too sharp. "They're here," he whispered. "They've always been here." I stumbled back, and in the blink of an eye, the hallway was empty. He was gone. I didn't wait. I bolted out of the house, down the street, all the way to my own home, but even there, I couldn't escape. That night, as I sat trembling in the dark, lights began to flicker outside my window. First one, then three. Floating, bobbing, circling my yard like vultures. By dawn, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I returned to the library, desperate to dig into the stories Mark had been obsessed with. I found old reports from the 1970s, accounts of missing persons in the Hockomock Swamp, rumors of cult gatherings, animal sacrifices. But what froze my blood was an entry from a local historian. The Wampanoag tribes called this land a place of spirits, where the boundary between worlds was thin. To disturb it was to invite them through. They do not stay behind. My skin crawled. It wasn't just ghost stories. It wasn't just urban legend. The triangle wasn't a place you visited and left behind. It was a threshold, and once you stepped through, something stepped with you. That evening, I tried calling Mark again. No answer. I biked back to his house in the fading light, but the windows were dark now, no glow, no sound. A for sale sign stood crooked in the front yard, as if it had been there for weeks, but I knew it hadn't. Neighbors said the family had left in a hurry. They couldn't or wouldn't tell me where. One woman whispered, "That boy." He wasn't right. He was talking to things that weren't there. I didn't believe her, or maybe I didn't want to. That night, the knocking started. 3 sharp raps on my window at 2:13 in the morning. I froze, staring into the glass, my reflection pale in the lamplight. Beyond it, the yard was empty. I tried to convince myself it was a branch, an animal. But then it came again, 3 knocks, deliberate, louder. I pulled the curtains shut and sat awake until morning, too afraid to close my eyes. When I finally got the courage to look outside, my blood ran cold. In the dirt under the window, fresh footprints circled the house, not shoe prints, bare, large, with claws. The triangle hadn't just followed us, it had claimed us. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist before it dragged me all the way back. The darkness was absolute, so thick it felt like it had weight. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, couldn't even be sure if my eyes were open. Mark smacked the flashlight, trying to revive it, but the bulb stayed dead. The only sound was our ragged breathing. Then the laughter came again. This time, it wasn't distant, it was right beside us, curling into my ear like smoke. I jerked back, swinging blindly at the air, my hand connected with nothing. "Stop messing with me," Mark hissed, but even he didn't sound convinced. "I didn't do anything," I whispered harshly. Something brushed past my arm, cold, damp, like a wet cloth dragged against my skin. I froze, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Then, ahead in the dark, a light flickered. Not our flashlight, something else. It was a pale, bluish glow, floating just above the ground. It swayed like a lantern in the hands of someone walking slowly toward us. Step by step, it grew brighter, casting long shadows across the reeds. For an instant, I thought maybe it was a hiker, someone who could lead us out. But then the shape holding it became clear. It wasn't a person. It was an outline, a figure without detail, just a shadow wearing the light like a mask. Its head tilted unnaturally, like it was studying us. "Do you see that?" I whispered. Mark's voice shook. Yeah, I see it." The figure raised the light higher, and the ground around us shimmered as if heat was rising from it. I blinked, and suddenly there were more 2, 3, 4 pale lantern lights drifting in from the swamp. They circled us slowly, closing in. Mark finally found his voice. "Run." We tore through the swamp, stumbling, tripping, gasping for air. My legs felt like lead, but adrenaline dragged me forward. Behind us, the lights followed, bobbing and weaving, never hurrying, but never falling back. And in between the rush of my blood in my ears, I heard the chanting, again low voices echoing through the trees, words I couldn't understand. We didn't stop until we saw the faint orange glow of the road ahead. The sight of asphalt never looked so holy. We burst out of the swamp, collapsing onto the shoulder of the road like drowning men gasping for air. For a moment, everything was silent again. The swamp behind us loomed like a black wall, the mist curling at its edges. The lights were gone. The voices had stopped. It was as if nothing had happened at all. Mark lay on his back, laughing breathlessly, but it was a nervous laugh, thin and cracking. "We made it," he said. We actually made it, but when I turned to look at him, my stomach knotted. His shirt sleeve was shredded, torn open in 3 long slashes. His arm beneath was bleeding, shallow but fresh. "What the hell happened?" I asked. He sat up, staring at it like he'd never seen his own skin before. I don't know. I didn't feel it. We patched it up as best we could with my bandana, neither of us wanting to admit what we were thinking. Those clawed footprints, the laughter, the figures. Something had touched him. We walked the rest of the way in silence, the night heavy around us. When I finally got home, the house felt wrong. It should have been safe, but the shadows in the corners seemed darker, thicker. When I went to close my bedroom door, I froze. On the wood, at shoulder height, were 3 damp streaks. Long, vertical marks, as if something with wet fingers had dragged them down the surface. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with a lamp on, staring at the door, listening. And somewhere, faint but clear, I swore I heard that laughter again. The next day, Mark came over looking pale and sick. He said he hadn't slept either. Worse, He told me he woke up to find mud on his bedroom floor. His window was locked, his shoes were clean, but muddy footprints trailed from the corner of the room to his bed. "They followed us," he said, his voice hollow. "They came out with us." I tried to tell him it was impossible, that maybe he tracked mud without noticing, but in truth, I believed him. Deep down, I felt it too. The triangle wasn't done with us. That evening, as the sun went down, we both swore we saw the same thing at different times. A figure standing across the street, still as stone watching. When cars passed, it vanished, only to reappear minutes later, closer. By the third night, Mark was losing his mind. He called me at 2 a.m, whispering like a child hiding from monsters under his bed. "They're in the house," he said. "I can hear them moving." The lights are in my room." Then the line went dead.